Good afternoon and welcome to the Black Power Hour. My name is Dr. Karin Stanford and I am a professor in political science and Africana studies at Cal State University, Northridge. Joining me in moderating this conversation and helping with technology is historian and archivist for the Tom and Ethel Bradley Center. He is also a doctoral candidate at Claremont University in history. The Black Power Hour is an outgrowth of the Black Power Archives housed at the Tom and Ethel Bradley Center. Currently, there are about 22 oral histories and photographs that make up the archive. The Black Power Hour aims to provide audiences with an opportunity to learn about the historical Black Power era in Los Angeles by presenting hour-long segments of conversations with former activists. These conversations are supported by the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences at Cal State University, Northridge. We want to thank Dean Searcy for supporting this work. The conversations will go beyond the hour that we have scheduled. We expect that this one will end in 19 minutes. In terms of our agenda for today, we will begin with an introduction and hold a dialogue with our guests lasting about 20 minutes. The remaining time is allotted for you to join us in the conversation. Finally, before you leave, we hope that you will click on the assessment instrument in the chat and respond to the four brief questions. Kumasi is our guest for today. We asked him to participate because of his involvement and leadership in the California prison movement. Keith Rice will introduce our guest.
Thank you, Karen. Kumasi has been instrumental in hooking the Bradley Center up with many of our interviewees who participated in the Black Power movement, but he also has his own important story. He has been a member of the Slausons neighborhood club, which the media labeled a gang. He was featured in the documentary Crips and Bloods, Made in America with fellow Slausons, Bird and Ron Wilkins. He was a leading participant of the California prison movement and close associate of George Jackson. He also articulated the ideas of the 1970 Folsom prison strike and Bill of Rights Manifesto. Please help us in welcoming Kumasi.
I started off, I was born on the East Coast in New York, spent some time in DC with family, and then was brought on a train when I was about 3 years old to Los Angeles. And I grew up in LA. I don't have much of a school background. I got kicked out of Florence Bell Avenue Nursery School when I was 4 years old. And it wasn't for bad behavior, but I got kicked out of there. And then I got kicked out of St. Malachy's within an hour of my arrival. And I went to Russell Elementary School on Firestone. And then a few years later, we moved from 83rd and Hooper down to 65th and Hooper. And I went to Miramonte and Edison. And from after 10 weeks at Edison Junior High School, I wound up at Reese High School, which was a junior and senior high school, all boys school for young men who have been put out to LA Unified School District, but they're of the same age where they still have to go to school. So that was where we went at Reese, which was a disciplinary school and what they called the next step to prison.
So you know what, Kumasi, let me just say that you are highly intelligent, and you and I mean, my gosh, you have been in the forefront of making sure that we could get the interviewees we needed to build this archive. So we appreciate that. But as somebody who's highly intelligent, and you know, you come from a great background, very learned parents, how did you end up being kicked out of so many schools?
Well, I got kicked out of Florence Bell Avenue School because I was accused of calling a little white boy a nigger. And we didn't call each other niggas in those days. Those were their fighting words. So I can only imagine that he came to school and called me a nigger. And I said, "You a nigger too." And his mother came and complained and had him put me out to school. Then when I went to St. Malachy's, I tried to go to St. Malachy's School. And the same day I got there, first sister that was about maybe 3-4 years older than me, she was just teasing me about the little Buster Brown shoes I had on. They came in black and white, blue and white, and brown and white, crepe sole shoes, and all the kids had them on, but she was teasing me saying I had on girl shoes. And I said, they're not girl shoes. Look at everybody else. I said, everybody wears these shoes. So anyway, we were going back and forth. And then this older white guy comes up and he grabs me and tells the other kids to stand in line and hit me in the stomach twice. And his little brother started crying because he didn't want to do that. So he said, well, let me show you what I'm talking about. So he hits me a couple of times. And there's a nun in the window, leaning on her elbows, watching this whole thing. So when all the kids walk away, I'm standing there by myself with tears coming down my face. And she comes up and she asks me, she said, what happened? I said, nothing. And she walks me over to the gate, tells me to leave the school and don't come back. So that's how I got kicked out of both of those schools.
So would you say that most of the trouble that you had in educational institutions were related to racism?
I don't know how, I mean, in a way, yeah, but it was just behavior, people's behavior, period. I mean, like I stayed in a neighborhood where you had white, Asian, brown, black. We didn't really make a distinction amongst each other. The guy that had the other kids jump on me, he was very close to people from my neighborhood. One day I was getting ready to attack him. I saw him walking and I was going to ambush him, and he stopped and talked to older cats from my neighborhood, some other Slausons, all right? And he was as close to them, probably closer to them than I was. So it's not that he was a racist. He was just a bully.
I see.
And he was such a bully, he got himself killed in 1959, because it was only a few years ago I found out what his name for. I looked for him all my life. I was looking for him like James Earl, like Conan the Barbarian was looking for James Earl Jones. And so at a funeral, I asked an older cat from my neighborhood, did he remember this white dude that looked like James Dean that played in the movie Giant, a handsome, wavy, blonde-haired white boy? And he stayed over there by Bunchy, and he knew all the older cats from Slauson. He said, yeah, and he gave me the guy's name. And I said, well, where is he at? And he said, he got killed in 1959. And it just broke my heart.
Okay, okay, thank you for explaining, some of the problems you had while growing up in Los Angeles. Tell us about the Slausons. You mentioned the Slausons. How do you define the Slausons, and why did you become a member?
Slauson was a combination of, I would say, social club, drill teams, skate club, car club. But if you mess with them, they would jump on you and you would find out that they fought harder than any gang you thought was a gang out there. We didn't call ourselves a gang. The police called us a gang. We called ourselves a set, a neighborhood, and it was broken down into various clubs. Every clique was named as a club. And like I tried to explain to people, the whole concept basically came out of junior high school. When you join in junior high school, a Letterman's Club. And the Letterman's Club, they wore sweaters and they wore patches. They had an elite identity on campus, but everybody in the neighborhood that went to that school could not join the Letterman's Club, but you could all join Slauson. And so that's where we found our welcome among each other outside of the campus environment that taught us some structure in society. So the Letterman's Clubs had president, vice president, and a sergeant at arms or a secretary or somebody. Every breakdown club from Slauson, called a clique, had a president, a vice president, and a treasurer or a warlord sometimes. Okay, every other so-called gang in LA had the same thing. All the gangs on the west side, the ones from Watts, the ones from Compton, everybody knew when you had a confrontation with another neighborhood and that neighborhood had a formation that was called a gang, that gang had a president and a vice president, and you had to always know who their leaders was by name. And so that was our culture. And it wasn't any different than the East Side Kids, the Little Rascals, or the Bowery Street Boys. It just went from one generation to another. And, you know, as time went on and youth culture shifted from one place to another, it started becoming more and more extreme until you got what you have today in the gangs around America.
I got a question, Karin. I'm still trying to understand, and you've explained it to me several times, the cliques and the sets. What clique or set did you belong to? I asked that right.
The set is Slauson itself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Our boundaries were from Slauson Avenue on the north to Firestone on the south, from Alameda on the east to the Harbor Freeway on the west, originally. Eventually, we spread out into satellite areas. And so many of those became formed, and there was so many people in LA that wanted to be a Slauson because we were real popular. We were, I guess, the leaders of popular street and youth culture, in dress, in behavior, in style, in character. Everything about us was so attractive that you could say we basically were the most influential youth that pretty much drove youth culture. All right. And so we eventually had so many people from so many places in LA that we started calling Los Angeles Slaus Angeles. Okay.
But you were a flip. And what's a flip?
The clique that I belonged to was Flip Slausons. Yeah. And so we were pretty much like the third row, almost not the third generation, but kind of like the third row. Everything in LA in those days was broken down in age groups, just like in school. You had classes and you had grades and you had people that matched the age group with the grades. So the guys who were already out of school at this time, when I joined at 10 years old, those were the big Slausons or the original Slausons. Mm-hmm. The little Slausons were guys who were just about to graduate from high school, in 11th and 12th grade. Baby Slausons were at that time mainly in the 10th grade, just starting high school. All right, 9th and 10th grade. I was a flip, and so I was in elementary school at the time. And I was not supposed to have been a flip. I was supposed to have been a little flip, but the guys that I joined who were older than me, they hung out at the park. And so the flips actually started at the park, and I always ran with guys that was older than myself. So when I was 10, they had to be like about 11 and a half, 12 years old.
Okay. You know, Kumasi, I don't want to belabor the conversation about gangs, but I do think it's important, or neighborhood clubs. I think it's important for you to help people understand when we talk about Bunchy Carter and the Renegades and you as a flip, it was the same organization, right? It was just an aspect of the Slausons.
Yeah, the Slauson is like a big tree with a lot of branches. And so he started his own branch called the Renegades. He started off as a little Slauson. But I don't know, there was some contradiction between him and the other little Slausons, and he peeled off and started Renegade Slauson. He stayed under the umbrella of Slauson, but he created his own sector called the Renegades, and they were broken into Renegades and Little Renegades. The Little Renegades were just about my age, or a little bit, maybe a year or two older.
Can you correct the history about the number? I think I've read on more than one occasion that there were 5,000 members of the renegade Slausons.
Not of the renegades. If you count all the Slausons together, every group, every clique of Slausons spread out around the city, it was approximately 4,000 or 5,000 Slausons, but everybody didn't know each other and we never took a head count. So that was what people assumed. They looked at it and they said, well, there's so many of them, it's got to be at least 4,000 or 5,000. So that's where that came from.
Okay, okay. So so then you grow up, and then you, as a young man, you are incarcerated, which is where you became involved in the prison movement. So tell us a little bit about that. You don't have to go into, of course, why you were incarcerated, but upon entering the first facility, what was that like for you? Why did you become involved in the prison movement?
The prison movement was really led by Black militants who distinguished themselves from your traditional prison reform movement, which doesn't really intend to make that many significant changes in the lives of people who are prisoners living inside the walls of a penitentiary. So the prison movement became a radically different, and they call it a radical reform movement, led by Black militants. And that is because the white prisoners didn't have grievances. Their culture was, if the food had little insects in it, little black beetles or whatever, I forgot what you call these little black bugs that you would find in dry cereal sometime. As far as they were concerned, that was protein. If a white prisoner was going to be executed in a gas chamber, he was not going to complain. He was not going to seek any outside help to try to stop the execution. He was going to be very macho about it. He was going to lift his head high. He was going to say goodbye to the other prisoners as he was leaving death row. And he was going to take it in a very stoical manner. Okay. He didn't have to deal with racism because, you know, he's white. He's a white prisoner. Okay. He didn't have to deal with any kind of discrimination or any disparity in condition or treatment. And not only that, the worst things were, the more they liked it. We were the ones who created protest movements. And the reason why I suggested putting up the manifesto, because all of the different conditions that we were fighting against are in the manifesto. The manifesto itself defines the content and the parameters of the prison movement. And if you look at the manifesto and read the points of the manifesto, you'll see that we were fighting in prison against the same thing our people on the streets were fighting against. There's hardly any difference at all, except the people on the street, as we always considered, we would say that our people outside are in minimum security while we're in maximum security. And they're in minimum security, but they just don't know it. Okay, but there's points in the manifesto where we're demanding that judges legislate a rule against shooting at, shooting around, and shooting prisoners for no reason except recreation. So you got people out here being shot at, shot, and shot around, basically for somebody's recreation. And we demanded that whatever rules of conduct that govern those who were governing our behavior inside of prison, we looked at, and those rules that were acceptable by law, that they could kill us at will, randomly, for no explainable reason, and get away with it and not be judged, not be punished in any kind of way. We demanded that those rule books that govern their behavior be looked at and that changes be made. We knew if we changed the policies, we could change their behavior. And it wouldn't be like that 100% of the time, but at least if their behavior didn't change and they still conducted themselves that way, we could appeal to a court of law to bring them to justice, and therefore they could not do it with impunity. It's no different than the way we have to fight the struggle out here on the streets. The only difference was we were behind a wall. We were paying attention to everything happening to us on this side of the wall in the so-called free world. And at the same time, we're looking at what's going on with our people all over the world, in every country in the world. You got a lot of people here that are fighting for Black freedoms and justice for Black people here in this country, but at the same time, they don't see it's necessary that Black people in Africa, the Caribbean, and other parts of the world get their freedoms and their justice just like ours. They don't realize that if they don't have their freedom and they don't have their justice, then we don't have our freedom and we don't have our justice, because they're doing the same thing to us everywhere. We have to kill that whole system that allows all of that stuff to take place. And it's a systematic process. It's not just individuals. Certain individuals will break away from that system, just like certain individuals who working within that system will work against what they're doing that destroys our lives and our futures. So that's what the prison movement was made up of. That's why I say I would rather discuss the Folsom Manifesto. If we could just get into certain demands in that Folsom Manifesto, then you will understand that there's no difference between the prison movement and the movements out here on the streets on this side of the wall in America.
So do you want me to pull that up?
I would prefer you did that, yeah.
Can I ask you a question though, just before we do that? And that is there a difference between the prison movement and a prison reform movement?
Yes. Yeah, see, prison reform movement started in this state especially. You only had two prisons in California originally. That was San Quentin and Folsom. And both of these prisons are like old fortresses with high walls you can't see on the other side of the wall. And, you know, there's no hot running water in the cells. I don't even want to get into all the details because it just takes too long to explain it. But anyway, the first reform measure was Chino Prison. Okay, and Chino doesn't have a wall and it doesn't have a fence. You could walk out of Chino essentially. The second reform was the building of Vacaville, Soledad, DVI, and Lone Park prisons. They all are built on the same structural pattern, a long corridor, quarter of a mile long, with all of these buildings sprouting out, which are cell blocks, what they call wings. And the schoolhouse, the hospital, the dining hall, all of that projects from this long hallway. And then you have a yard. So the so-called reform measures were structural in content. And the only thing they added to that was that Dual Vocational Institute in Tracy, called DVI, Soledad, were what they called training centers, where they had vocational training and skills. Mm-hmm. Pull up to Tracy, the first thing you see is an airplane sitting inside the yard. They had an airplane mechanic shop. They got shoe shops. I worked in the shoe shop, making shoes, repairing shoes. You got machine shops. When you get to Soledad, you got a clothing industry, you got a wood industry, you got a paper products industry. stuff like that. So these are the ways that they use prison labor, but at the same time, they created these training facilities for the purpose of trying to rehabilitate prisoners, give them an education. You had schoolhouse. You first thing you did was give them an assessment to find out what level of education they had. And one of the conditions for release was that by the time they got a parole, they should have graduated from high school or at least gotten a what do you call it, GED. Okay. And then you had other things, like you had yoke fellows, you had religious programs. All of this was designed to try to correct prisoners' psychological and social behavior so that they could fit compatibly back into society once they was released. So those were what they call reform measures. What we came up with is only explained if you start looking at the points in the manifesto. That's why I say people know about the manifesto and they'll talk about the map, but they won't look into the manifesto to find out just what we were doing, just what we were fighting for, what we were fighting against.
Okay.
But
So
it's all explained in the manifesto itself.
So while Keith pulls up the manifesto, can you tell us a little bit about what happened to Fred Billingsley, and then we'll open up the conversation for others to participate.
Fred Billingsley is a prisoner, a brother out of Pittsburgh. And I met him in the LA County Jail in a game of tonk. And from the LA County Jail, we went to Chino, to the Reception and Guidance Center, where they give you a battery of tests to find out what all your different skills are, where they could place you, what prison they're going to send you to. If you were a plumber on the street and they needed a plumber in Vacaville, they send you to Vacaville, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, he was a real eccentric brother. Everybody used to look at him and they called him triple hip, because he was real hip. I mean, real hip, super cool. And one day he heard me talking to some guys and explaining how everything you read in a book is not true, and how the author gives you his point of view and his perception of reality and history, or whatever he's talking about. But you have to look at different frames of reference, and you got to compare them and eventually draw your own conclusions. So he started carrying books around, and he started carrying books everywhere. And so everybody thought that was odd. Anyway, he was eccentric, but he wasn't crazy. I go to Tracy, get kicked out of Tracy in '67 and go to Soledad. He comes to Soledad around 1969, or close to 1969. He gets off the bus coming from Vacaville, the California Medical Facility, where they perform electroconvulsive shock treatments, where they perform what they call aversion therapy. Aversion therapy is where you take somebody that is known for violence or for sexual deviant, for rape or something like that. You tie them down on a bed and you make them watch a film in violence. And every time they see an act of violence, you shock the shit out of them. Every time, if you're trying to turn them around from any kind of sexual aggressiveness, you show them sex films and you shock them. And what happens is, after they go through this a number of times, even when you don't apply the shock, if they think about violence, they automatically experience the shock. If they think about sex, they automatically experience the shock. Or if they give them nectane, when they shoot this drug called nectane in them, it makes them feel like they're drowning. It gives them a sensation of actually dying. And so over a period of time, if you take them through this process, that is supposed to be the healing process. When Robert Charles Jordan, who we used to call Cadillac, but I named him Maji, he filed on a piece of toilet paper in 1966, a habeas corpus to the Monterey County Superior Court, charging the state with all kinds of vicious behavior, and especially he wanted to shut down a strip cell, a barren cell that had no bed, nothing in it. It was a hole in the middle of the floor they call a Chinese toilet. And that is your toilet, and that is your wash basin, okay? And they control the flush. So if they really wanted to anger you or really wanted to disturb you, they would not flush it, because the doors are closed, you got solid steel doors in front of you. And so you're in that cell alone and it's cold. They don't even let you have toilet paper, because if you got toilet paper, you take that and you'll wrap it up like a mummy. You'll use it to cover your body so that you can get warm. So anyway, he filed a lawsuit against them. And during the trial, to decide whether the court was going to stop them from using these kind of measures against prisons, the psychiatrist named Dr. Hack, who provided so-called psychiatric treatment at Soledad, got on the stand and bragged that electroconvulsive shock treatments, he said that we used it for discipline. That if a prisoner was unruly and they had him in the hole, he would have other prisoners go in and beat him up. They'd pull him out of his cell, strap him to a gurney and put electrodes on his head and plug him into the wall. They would start giving him electric convulsive shock treatments. And he said that was the most humane way to deal with us. So he actually caused the state prison system to lose the case. And the court ruled that they couldn't do that anymore. Not that they stopped it, but they at least minimized the use of it, and they minimized the use of the strip cell, which had the Chinese toilet in it.
So in terms of Fred Billingsley, I think, so he was murdered in his cell.
Fred Billingsley went to Vacaville where they do all that kind of stuff. And the next time I saw him in 1969, I think, he had lost his physique. He was kind of bizarre. And I asked him, why did he have this patch on his back? And he explained to me that that was a patch they put on his back in Vacaville. And it had some kind of drug in it that they were testing the effect of the drug on the human body. And in other words, he was being used as a guinea pig. And he said they do that to a lot of prisoners up there. And because they give the prisoners a little bit of money for these experiments, that, you know, they're happy to get the money. So they'll submit themselves to the experiments. And so I asked him, did he realize that they may one day use drugs to control populations? And that he was helping them figure out how to subdue and oppress people. And I said, why don't you stop taking this stuff? And he said, well, I can't. And he told me that they had given him a lot of shock treatments and they was giving him psychotropic medication. And I said, man, why don't you stop taking this stuff? He said, I can't stop taking it because if I do, they'll send the green shirts in on me. And the green shirts were people who worked in the hospital and they wore these green, you know, hospital smocks and stuff. So later on, we were both in the hole in San Quentin. And there were times when he would speak real plain and coherently. And then there was times when he would just trail off in conversation and just be very incoherent. I mean, just, you don't know what he's talking about. And on the night of February 25th, 1970, he went off into one of these spells, one of these episodes of incoherent speech. And he started shaking the bars a few times, and he set fire to a butt can, a vegetable can. He put some paper in a vegetable can and set it on fire. So the guards went and got some more guards, and they paraded around in front of his cell for a long time, teasing him and threatening him, telling him what they was going to do to him. And then they brought up about 6 canisters of tear gas. They looked like fire extinguishers. They were canisters that big. And they dumped each one of them in his cell. All of this, it took about an hour to take place. And he finally started saying, let me out, let me out. I can't breathe, let me out. And then they sent the hospital workers in on him, the green shirts. And they drug him out by his balls. And the guards beat him and choked him. They had towels. They were practicing chokeholds outside his cell with these towels. And they beat him with their clubs, and they used the chokeholds, and they wrestled him. You could hear him tumbling down 3 flights of stairs. And then they put him in a strip cell on the first floor. About a half hour later, word came up through all of the tiers, all of the floors, that he was seen being taken out on a gurney with a sheet over his head. And the next day, the warden came on a public address system and said, there's a rumor that they had killed Fred. And he said, we didn't murder Fred. He said, it's deplorable that we don't have psychiatric facilities here at San Quentin. And Fred was a psychotic, and that he had set fire to his cell, and they had to use tear gas to restrain him, and that the combination of tear gas and smoke from the fire, he said, asphyxiated him. And that's how he died. And if we didn't believe that version, we should consult with any Black correctional officer that worked in the prison, and he would tell us the same story. Fred's mother won a $8 million settlement for the wrongful death at the hands of the state. And that was a case that was handled by a white female attorney named Sally Seaman Soliday out of San Francisco. So that's what happened with that case.
And the reason I bring that up is because my understanding is, and you can correct us, in this conversation if I'm wrong, is that what happened to Fred sort of escalated the already existing prison movement. So would you say that's the case?
No, that was one of a chain.
That
was just one of a chain of events. There was another brother named Willie Powell in Soledad a year before that from San Diego. And he was an asthmatic, and they fired enough tear gas into his cell to cause him to choke to death. And then wanted his brother, who was on the main line, to tell his mother when she came up the next day to collect his body. They wanted his brother to tell his mother that he died of an asthma attack. And there are several brothers who, were hung over a period of years. There was a situation that Eldridge talks about in Soul on Ice of a brother named Booker, who was the minister in the Nation of Islam. And Blacks and whites got into an argument in their cells one night, and they decided that when they opened the door and let them out on the yard the next day, they were going to enter combat. They were going to fight each other. And the brothers asked the minister in the Nation, are you going to come out and fight? He said, I'll come out. He said, but I have no intention to fight. He said, my religion teaches me, not to be the aggressor, but if somebody aggresses upon me, to try to pull their head off. I'm going to stand on the opposite end of the yard, my head bowed and my hands turned upward, and I'm going to pray that don't nobody come over there. And when they come out on the yard the next day, they were fighting on the other end of the yard, and the gunman fired and shot him while he was praying, and he wasn't even in the fight. I mean, so it's a whole chain, of things. the manifesto breaks down all of the different things that had to be dealt with, that we were fighting against. And in order to do that, you had to have a collective body of people who agreed to work together to break all this kind of stuff up. And you just couldn't do it by asking and praying and singing and talking to them and dialoguing with them about this. You couldn't negotiate without some major threat to their whole system. So the biggest threat that we could bring to them at the time was to shut down the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The entire prison workforce, the California correctional industries, the industrial prison complex, which was bringing as much revenue to the state of California as the Presidio, the military complex. But they shut the Presidio down and closed a lot of military bases. So the prison workforce became probably the biggest revenue generating machine in the state. And we understood that if you shut this down for a certain length of time, the state would go bankrupt without us. And while the strike was going on, right before the strike actually got started, people in the news, journalists were predicting. They said, well, if the strike lasts one day, that'll be so many $1 million lost. If it lasts 5 days, it'll be this amount of money that the state will lose. But they knew that that was the bottom line, that the biggest threat to them was bringing the industry wheels to a screeching halt and stopping the flow of money coming from and coming through the workforce, the prison labor force. So that was the only way we could hurt them. And that's why Chip Fitzgerald wrote me later on, years later, and say, man, when you guys put that manifesto together, he said, do you realize almost everything in that manifesto came, to fruition? He says, you guys made them back up on all those levels. But because the prisoners who came behind us spent all their time bickering and fighting amongst themselves, so who was going to be the most powerful force of convicts on the yard, and they didn't fight to protect the interest of prisoners, period. They allowed them to go back to the old ways. And now the conditions in these prisons in this country are far worse than they were before we stopped them through the Folsom strike and the manifesto at Folsom, which was copied by the prisoners at Attica, except they just had a preamble, the poem, the 1922 Claude McKay poem, If We Must Die. They led off with that, but they were fighting for the same things we were.
Okay, thank you. So we want to give our guests an opportunity to ask questions. You're free to, you can type in the chat, although it's really not necessary because we'd like for us to kind of have a conversation with each other as well as our guests. Does anyone have questions?
I'll display the manifesto again if we need it. I'm gonna come out.
Well, please keep it up in front of me.
It's either all or none. So I'll just leave it up.
Yeah, for me.
Oh no, I can't just separate it for you. Either we all see it or not. So,
okay, then if you want to bring it down so that they could do the, start asking
I'll bring
questions,
it back
and then bring it up when I want to go through it.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay.
So does anyone have questions? You want to join the conversation? Okay, Keith, you said you had a question?
Yeah. Why were the manifesto demands considered radical? And do you want me to pull it up for that?
Yeah. Because our demands went far beyond any other demands that prisoners would make.
So who were some of the I think, Kumasi, what was your role in the Folsom Manifesto?
Okay, let me see something. See, your generic demands about food, quality, health, other words, your medical practices inside the prison, you know, like we're talking about at Folsom, how they only had one doctor. And if there were multiple injuries, then they had to decide who was a priority. So, you know, you consider who they're gonna feel is gonna be the priority patient when you got 4 or 5 people with knife wounds in them and they're all dying. So, you know, then there was a situation where we had somebody who died of an ingrown toenail surgery in Folsom. So we were talking about how inadequate the medical care and the medical staff were. We demanded more staff. Out here on the streets, you had a thing called affirmative action. In the prisons, we started and we forced them to give us what we call a quota system, because in San Quentin's surgery room, you had prisoners who were there as what you call a surgeon's assistant or a physician's assistant. And in the recovery room, you had white dudes working in the recovery. Well, if a brother came in there because he was stabbed by a white prisoner, and he got in the surgery room or the recovery room, it was gonna kill him in there. They're gonna pull the plug on him in there. So a quota system that we made them start meant that wherever they was, we had to be. So if there was a white prisoner in the surgery room, a black prisoner had to be in the surgery room. If there was a white prisoner in the recovery room, a black prisoner had to be in the recovery room. If every job place, every part of the prison, they didn't want us working in machine shops. They didn't want us learning the tool and die trades. They didn't want us using sophisticated equipment. We would go in the same shop as them, but they would make us carry a broom and a dustpan. You go around and sweep the floor. You pick up after everybody, but you're not gonna put your hands on all this sophisticated equipment. We made them change that, all right? Let's go through some of the stuff. Because we were organizing and pushing for these changes that they didn't want to make, they would put us in a hole. In Solidad, we had decided in the movement that we would use it as a trade school. And each of us who had took a trade would master the trade, get out, go back to the community and start a mini business. And if somebody else came out that was proficient in that same trade, they would work in that business and they would create, they would start to build or contribute to the economy within our community from whence we came. The idea was to come back to be an asset rather than a liability, not just to bring compensation back like I'm making now, but to bring skills back, to open up small businesses and go from there and try to generate a larger income, a revolving door income throughout our community and to strengthen the Black community. When they found out that that was what we were trying to do, they decided to start killing us. They couldn't let us out of prison to do things. Like in other words, their position was we could not interrupt their job security. Okay, we couldn't lessen their job security. They were doing just fine as long as they could keep running us up the ramp to slaughter and bringing us in these places and using us as slaves and a cheap labor force where they could build a state economy off of us. And if we weren't coming in and out of prisons on a regular basis in wholesale numbers, then that was going to put a real big dent in the state economy. And it was also going to deprive them of their job security. And they weren't having it. So I had sent to the streets, and nobody remembers that I sent it to, having received it. It was a memo that was circulated from the warden's office, from Sacramento, from the state capital. And the memo said, we have now a new type of prisoner, a prisoner who believes that it is society and it is the social policies that have caused him to become desperate and to act like a desperado and to commit crimes, that his being in prison is the result of the conditions he's been under all these years while living in this country. We cannot afford to let him spread that philosophy around the prisons. We cannot afford to let him be released to the street while he still holds to that kind of a philosophy. And then they said, yeah, to figure out what to do with us. And they were insinuating that they were going to have to get rid of us, but in a way where they wouldn't have to claim credit for what they did to us. So Sacramento put together a death list, and all over the state of California, they started identifying people who were the influence, what they call influencers today, or leaders, in all of these different prisons who were pushing this Black prison movement. And those names went to Sacramento on a death list. And so they started systematically killing us. Either they would be the ones who would commit the murder, or they would get from what they, in the old days, in the southern prison camps, referred to as shack bullies, where you put somebody real tough up to control other prisoners. He has the right to beat him up, or rape him, or kill him, whatever it takes to intimidate the prisoners in that area so that they would behave and go along with his leadership while he was working directly under the prison administration and the prison staff. So
we have a hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
We have someone who wants to ask a question. Please, Tandi Seasway.
Greetings, Kumasi. Greetings, everyone.
Greetings, Tandi. How you doing?
I'm good, sir. I'm good. Can you tell us, to the best of your knowledge, can you give us like an idea of who W.L. Nolan was? Why George Jackson would say this was one of the men who redeemed him? And if you can talk about your relationship with Comrade George.
Well, let me try to get people to understand what was going on in these prisons vis-a-vis what's going on in open society, and why Black prisoners formed a prison movement that was no different than the movements out here and the liberation movements all over the world, and how our protest movement was just as legitimate as anybody else. But you got to understand the inner workings, not only of the movement, but what we were up against and why we fought. If I can read some of the manifesto, then you'll understand. The manifesto defines the movement. Well, so there's no sense in having it if you don't want to go into it and find out what's in it, because it answers all the questions that anybody's going to raise.
Okay, let me just say one thing, Kumasi. We also have another question. And we definitely can talk about certain aspects of the manifesto. We have 30 more minutes, but we definitely want to get some of the questions in, and we can, we didn't frame this as the Folsom Manifesto talk. We framed it as a California prison movement, but
the manifesto and the movement are one.
Yeah, they are, but we do want to get our audience, the guests who came, we want them to have a conversation with us about some of the issues that you're raising. So Dr. Henderson, Dr. Errol Henderson.
Well, thanks so much for this program, Sister Karin, and thank you, Brother Kumasi, for your presentation. And I also just wanted to show appreciation for Brother Bird. Well, I've listened to some of your the history that you provided in some of the Kev Mack videos as well on LA. So I really appreciate that as well. But what I wanted to ask you, Brother Kumasi, the strike lasted 19 days. You obviously didn't get everything that you demanded. No strike does, rarely. But I wanted to get a sense on what you all settled on then, and what the other folks that you that you commented on before didn't build on, that that you think were among the most important that came out of the manifesto, and what you all agreed on after the 19 days of the original strike. And if I could, Brother Kumasi, follow up with what do you think of James Carr and James Carr's analysis? He said this, especially when you compare what was going on inside, what was going on outside. If I may read from Carr's book on page 217, he said, here, even when the cons realized they were all opposed to the system, they were prevented from locating themselves realistically within it. Rather than recognize that they were on the margins of society and study strategically the development of society as a whole, they saw themselves as a class apart from the proletariat or as its vanguard, and adopted an ideology of class war by which the only battlefield was the prison itself. This is the key line, Brother Kumasi, I want you to respond to. They mistook the system's arm for its heart. Would you respond to some of that, Brother Kumasi, if you would? Thank you.
No, that's James Carr's analysis. That's his opinion. And at the time that James Carr was in San Quentin and Soledad, the majority of prisoners didn't want anything to do with the prison movement. And the few who did and who wanted to organize and lead and structure the prison movement were not all in full agreement with one another. Consciousness comes in steps and degrees. So in this country, in our country, in every place I've been, I mean, when I was in Brazil, you know, they know all our history, but they weren't ready for a revolutionary consciousness or a revolutionary movement. So I met a guy named Vovô in Liberdade in Brazil. He was the leader of what they call the Black consciousness movement. Here in this country, the Black consciousness movement was the beginning of our movement. The first thing we had to do was decide who we were, what we were, and where we was at, and where we came from and where we wanted to go. Leopold Senghor in Senegal was the leader of the Black consciousness movement there, and he called that movement negritude. Remember? He talked about negritude, about us coming onto ourselves, realizing who we are, and facing all our problems and conditions on a collective level. Most of us in this country have never agreed with each other unanimously on who we are, where we come from, or what we want. We all have different ideas, and that's based on the fact that people have different levels of information and education, okay, and different kinds. Some people think they're educated when they're really indoctrinated, okay, and you could say that for both sides of the spectrum. So to me, Jimmy Carr was a little ahead of me. It wasn't that many of us pushing the movement when he was in there. It was a handful of them that had to carry the weight of everybody else. I keep telling people that 1% of us had to defend the lives and the interest of 99% of the Blacks that was in the prison system. 1% of us. And we were the wrecking crew. We were the theorists. We were the scholars. We were the prison intellectuals. We were the ones that had to pull all this stuff together and then find ways to pull other people together, find what symbols we could use. What could we get other people to identify with so that they would think about this on a daily basis and then get involved in making and shaping the necessary changes that we were hell-bent on arriving at. So it was a process. And at his time, the process wasn't in full swing yet. But when he got out of prison, he stayed in touch with George Jackson, and he stayed in touch with the prison movement and what it was about. And so he was a fifth columnist from that side of the wall, from this side of the wall. He was still in support of George and still in support of the movement itself. So in order to discuss what the movement is about, it's almost impossible to get to the brass tacks of this without going through the manifesto itself, which explains the movement.
So Kumasi, you want us to put the manifesto back up? So can we take about 5 minutes and go through it, and then we can go back to asking questions?
Sure.
So will you do that, Keith? And then we'll have about 20 more minutes for conversation. Oh, and possibly get back to Tandi's question.
Yes, I was going to say that we never
Yeah,
finished
because-
that question.
Right.
Can you read it? Can you see it?
Make it a little bit larger for me.
Okay. How's that?
Okay, good. All right, I've already talked about the healthcare and we wanted better visiting. In the beginning, when I went into prison, you could only write 10 people. And anyone that you would visit with had to be on that 10-person list. And if you were married, you could not write another woman without your wife's permission. You could not read any materials about the civil rights movement. If you had collected pictures out of magazines of Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael, Rap Brown, they would send you, and if you had any books with any of those references or any of that history, you would go to the hole and they would lock you up for what they call inflammatory literature. And don't have a star and a crescent or a picture of Elijah Muhammad from the Nation of Islam. Oh, you would be locked up indefinitely. So anyway, we're saying that on number 4, the demand is that each man presently held in the adjustment center be given a written notice with the warden of custody's signature on it, explaining the exact reason for the placement in a severely restrictive confine of the adjustment center. 5, an immediate end to the indeterminate adjustment center terms. 6, an end to the segregation of prisoners from the mainline population because of their political beliefs. 7, an end to the political persecution, racial persecution, and there's something to block in the way, but anyway, I can't read that whole thing on number 7, but I hope you can. Number 8, an end to the persecution and punishment of prisoners who actually practice their constitutional right of peaceful dissent. An end to the tear gassing of prisoners who are, I can't see the whole thing, who are locked in their cells. The passing of a minimum and maximum term bill that will eradicate the indeterminate sentence that we have been put in prison with. So we're talking about how prisoners are sentenced, and we're talking about how they are treated after they are convicted and sentenced. 9, an end to the tear gassing of prisoners who are locked in the cells. 10, the minimum, okay, 11. That these were some of the stronger demands that have never been put forth by prisoners before or since. And we call them the 9 political rights for prisoners demands. One of them was that we demanded that industries be allowed to enter the institutions and employ prisoners to work 8 hours a day and fit into the category, I can't see all of that. But anyway, we also wanted.
Let me just say one thing before you finish. Dr. Henderson was kind enough to put the Folsom Manifesto in the chat so everybody can just click on it and also review it and ask questions related to what's in the chat.
Beautiful.
Why don't you take a few more minutes, and then we want to get back to the conversation with our guests, who we invited to conversate with you.
Bring them on. Take
No,
it
I'm
down.
saying go-
No, let's go forward. All right, I'm saying, okay, let's go.
Okay, so Tondi asked a question. Tondi, you want to re-ask your question?
I heard her question. She asked me who was W.L. Nolan, what was his relationship and significance to George Jackson, and what was my role in my relationship to George Jackson. W.L. Nolan was a brother out of Oakland, California, who was kind of in the beginning a combination of a gangster, but he was well learned, well studied, and well versed on what was going on with our people and our people's struggle here and around the world. And that's what he and George had common. When they first met, W.L. Nolan was a significant member of the Mob, which was a Bay Area organization in prison. George, at the same time, was with the Black Mafia, which is a Southern California organization inside the prison. The Black Mafia and the Mob competed for power over the rackets and the influence in the prison yard. Because W.L. was so politically conscious and George was so politically conscious, they came to the agreement that, hey, we need to stop this bickering among ourselves and this territorial conflict. And we need to pull this into a political organization. And we need to politicize the other brothers and find out which ones are going to ride with us on that level. We need to start fighting for our people and start fighting for having a power struggle amongst each other. And they formed another organization called the BMF, which was the Black Militant Front. And that was George Jackson and W.L. Nolan to pull together the Black Militant Front so that W.L. could bear that influence upon his comrades from the Bay Area, and George could bear his influence on the political level to the comrades from Southern California. And that became a very strong Black militant organization inside of San Quentin. And some of the members went to other states. James McLean, William Christmas, Black Militant Front. Will Howard Toll, and a bunch of other guys. I just can't think of their names and don't even need the name. Black Militant Front. So, in every prison in California and every prison in the country, you had militants that either came out of the Nation of Islam or were influenced at some point during their life by the teachings within the Nation of Islam and the posture, the militant posture, fighting for Black people in this country, for their rights and their dignity. Or there were other organizations outside of the nation. You had Black nationalist organizations all over the country. Then when we were locked up, you had RAM, the Revolutionary Action Movement. You had the Mau Mau's. Eventually you had the Republic of New Africa. But prior to that, you had Malcolm X's African American Unity, Organization of African American Unity, which put forth the theory, the ideas, and the strategies necessary for all of us to get involved in and work out together in order to get what we wanted. So you got prisoners who are of all these different persuasions, and they come together because their identity, number one, is their historical and racial identity, but at the same time, the fact that now they are paying more attention to and becoming more involved in the necessary political struggles, okay, for our people here in this country. And so I came out of a militant street posture and fought against the police and the National Guard in the 1965 Watch Rebellion and entered prison looking for other people of the same mindset with the same kind of heart who wanted to continue to fight, but take it always to a higher level. And so I found those people and I linked up with them. And that's as far as that goes.
Kumasi, I want to follow that up with, you mentioned George Jackson. How did you meet George Jackson?
George was eventually transferred from San Quentin down to Soledad in late 1968. When I was in Tracy in 67, a guy that was from my neighborhood, Melvin Ayers, got into an incident in the chow hall in San Quentin where he put 2 cups of milk on his tray, and the guard told him to take one off and he wouldn't. So the guard took it off and he put it back. The guard took it off, he put it back. The guard eventually stuck his finger in the milk and he slapped the guard. And it turned into a big riot in San Quentin. And so they decided to go on a strike, a general strike. And so the agreement was the whites would police their own. If somebody white broke the strike, nobody else was supposed to deal with him but whites, and so on. And black and brown, everybody would police their own group. And 2 white dudes the next day was found dead in the back of some kind of a trash truck on the lower yard. And the white boys wanted to know who did that. None of them took responsibility, and they asked the Mexicans and they didn't take, so they said, oh, guys did that. And the 5,000 prisoners divided up. And there were Mexicans on the black side, there were Mexicans on the white side who went to war with each other later on. They had to bring in the National Guard. That was January 1967. They had to bring the National Guard in, and they had to shoot machine guns, and they had to beat prisoners through a gauntlet, make them get naked. And they beat them and shit from the lower yard back to their cell blocks. George Jackson got locked up during that incident. And I think he was accused of murder during that incident. So he stayed in the hole. And when he comes out the hole, they bring him down to Soledad. And they had told him that if he had kept 1 year clean without any incident, they was going to send him to the streets. So that's why he came down there and they let him come to the main line to see how he was going to act. And that's how I met him, when he came to the main line. And I was being trained in karate by another brother named Tony Gibson. But I also was a librarian, and in the back of the library, I was teaching an underground Swahili class because I was introducing Swahili to these guys because I wanted them to be able to speak in an open and a secret language without nobody understanding what they were saying. Okay. And so I conducted these classes in the back of the library, and George was coming in the back of the library wanting to fight, wanting to practice combat. And so he wanted to break up my class and use my space, and I made a deal with him. If you're going to use my space, then you got to teach me what you're teaching Tony. And that's when we hooked up, and we went through a whole lot of stuff, not just fight instruction, but a whole lot of other stuff.
Thanks, Kumasi. Karen? You're muted, Karen. There's a question too from Edgar Puebla.
Okay.
I'm honest, so I'll read that. It's going back to something else. He said, was your friend Triple Hip called crazy because his radicalism was considered dangerous?
It was his personal style, the way he was just acting real hip. And he wasn't radical. He didn't have any politics yet, but he was leaning in that direction, and he wanted to study it. He wanted to learn as much as he could. But his outer character was different from most convicts. And so they considered him an eccentric.
Let me ask you, Kumasi, can you talk about the connection between the California prison movement, maybe other prisons, and Attica, especially?
And can I ride on that, Sister Karen?
Oh, sure.
Can I ride on your question? Brother Kumasi, would you relate that to your call for, in the manifesto, for a prisoners union, which you accomplished? But was that something that spread to Attica? I know it went to Michigan, went to all different places. And is that something they co-opted later? That's what I want to ask you. Thank you, Sister Karen. Thank you, Brother Kumasi.
Well, that's not really accurate. The prisoners union that Popeye Jackson and them formed later, I didn't have any reason to support it because it wasn't labor related. They just formed a prisoners union of prisoners, ex-cons. And I guess what they were going to do was kind of like your Alcoholics Anonymous, your Narc Anonymous, and your 5-step program, 7-step program, 12. In other words, they come together to discuss what was going on in there, to talk about the grievances, and to be an outside support team, okay, and to draw attention through their union to what was going on with the rest of us in prison and the fight that was going on, and to aid and abet that fight through lawyers and anybody else that they could galvanize outside that would be a support group that would be interested in joining this fight. And so what we wanted was to form or join labor unions. We wanted to work with an increased wage so that with that kind of a wage, we could pay restitution and we could support family members. You got women on the street with children trying to figure out how to split a check between her family on the streets and a man that's either a husband or somebody she's in love with and supporting. He's working 40 hours a week and she's trying to figure out how to send money to him and support him. We wanted to be able to send money to people on the streets. And if I could work and make enough money and I could constantly send money home, I could pay for the phone calls that's going on between us, but I could also help pay rent. I could help establish a base to which I could return to and live in. And I've created a relationship and a bond that is so mutually supportive. We got mutual respect for each other, and therefore we should be very compatible with each other by the time I return. That's what that idea was about. So we also, in order to do this, we wanted to make the courts force the industries, the prison industries, to conform to state labor laws. There was no safety measures. There was a whole lot of stuff that was out of place. It was just a slave workforce. If you got killed, got your arm cut off, lost a leg, a finger, or something like that on one of these machines, so what? You know what I'm saying? Period. And they would not change the safety rules so that it wouldn't happen to the next guy to hit that line. So we wanted them to conform to the state labor laws. And it was a whole lot of other stuff we were trying to get them to conform to. We never had a chance to sit down and bargain with them at a table and settle on anything. What happened was I had changed the whole way that we went on strike. Previously, the warden, when he knew a strike was in motion, would say, bring me 2 whites, 2 brown prisoners, and 2 black prisoners as a grievance committee. And I'll sit down in the warden's office and I'll talk to them and we'll hatch this out. When those people go in to see the warden, he has them chained up and shipped out. And then he'll get on the radio and say, well, we got rid of the troublemakers. We get them from time to time. And I know the rest of you want to go back to our normal program. I know you like the way I run my prison. These agitators and these upstarts, you know, they created the commotion that threw all of your lives in disarray. But now we want to go back to normalcy. And I know that you're just as happy as I am that they're gone. So rather than do that, I changed the whole platform. I had 10 Panther lawyers I had access to. I was writing in 5 or 6 different newspapers, the Berkeley Barb, the Berkeley Tribe, the National Guardian, which later became the Guardian, the intercommunal youth, intercommunal newspaper of the Black Panther Party. I had 4 or 5, and I was running my own secret San Quentin Underground Free Press that I had somebody working either in the warden's office, the captain's office, or the lieutenant's office where they were typewriters. They would take what I wrote in my own hand and they would print it up using carbon paper, and I'd make them bring it out in envelopes so that I could distribute this newspaper throughout the prison. But a lot of guys would read it, throw it on the ground, they would pick it up, and they would go back to the warden's office. So he was looking for the author of this San Quentin Underground Free Press. But I was also able to get the San Quentin Underground Free Press out to the streets. I also had a link to Panther women who would be working on the San Francisco and Oakland radio station. In the morning, when the guys woke up in prison, they put their earphones on their head and hear these women talking to them like Tokyo Rose and these sweet, sensuous voices. And they're encouraging them to take part in the prison movement. They're encouraging them to take part in this strike, to fight for their rights and to fight for prisoners in general. I would even have somebody put stuff up in the women's bathroom in the visiting area so that if their visitor went to the bathroom, she would see this stuff and come back out and ask him, are you a man? Are you going to stand up? Are you going to take part in this? Or are you going to chump out? So there were different ways to agitate. There were different ways to try to put some stimulus into this, all right? But the main reason why we didn't have to sit down and negotiate and settle with the prison authorities was because I involved lawyers. I turned it over to lawyers, legislators. We had some people from the Black Congress. We had lawyers, Panther lawyers, and then we had outside organizations. We had Brown Beret, Panthers, and we had other organizations. The whole idea was we would sit down and go on strike. They would go to Sacramento and they would negotiate with the heads of the prison system. And our strike was so powerful, so profound, that it caused a legislative debate within the capital of California. And a lot of that stuff that when we demanded the end to the indeterminate sentence, the reason I got out, the reason why Doc Holliday and a bunch of others got out is because they killed the indeterminate sentence and they came up with a determinate sentence. It was supposed to have been better, but it turned out to be worse because these guys don't hold a tug of rope. They let go, you know, and they figured, okay, we didn't want all our victories and our issues and stuff. We don't have to continue this. So they let go. You got to understand that something that's put on paper has to have a committee, a watchdog committee of some sort that will, or compliance committee that will oversee them. It has to have an overseer committee, a citizens overseer committee to make sure that they continue with this and that they live up to these changes that have been put into law. Otherwise, if you don't have anybody watching them, anybody insisting that they carry this out on a continuous basis, then when you relax, they will relax in the sense that they'll go back to the old way and they'll start doing the same thing they was doing before you made them change. So that's how we won these significant changes. Our fight, it was a long drawn out fight to stop the legal executions in this country. We demanded that the people on death row come off death row. We demanded that self-avowed revolutionaries be allowed to be deported from this country to third world countries that had the same politics as us that would accept us. We demanded a prisoner exchange. Okay, this was during the Vietnamese War. And so the parents of the missing in action and the POWs kept begging the president, bring our boys home. Where's our sons? Bring our sons home. They busted a note in my cell in Folsom where Warren Wells from the San Francisco Black Panther Party had written me a note that said, comrade, I have a fiendish plan. And he was talking about how the parents of the soldiers who were dying and who were being captured or were missing in action wanted their sons to come home. He said, why don't we get somebody to propose that they exchange us for the American prisoners of war being held by the North Vietnamese? Oh, and they had a fit about that. Because matter of fact, when we sued them, they countersued us. Folsom Prison countersued us, and they put that note in there. And they said that when we came up there, everybody was being compliant. It was going along with the program, you know, accepting, you know, what was happening to them in the prison. And we came in there and stirred up all this mess. And they said that anything that they did to us as a consequence was because of our own behavior, that we caused them to treat us this way, the same way that Dr. Hack got on the stand and say that when he uses electroconvulsive shock treatments against prisoners for disciplinary reasons, that is, to him, the most humane way for us to treat these prisoners. And he lost the case in court because that was the way he boasted. That one flew over the cuckoo's nest is the way to go for us. At one point, they said that they did a study and said that violence is hereditary, and any of us that's in prison for violence should have a frontal lobotomy performed and should be sterilized so that we cannot get out of prison and make children who would become violent because of our bloodline. And that's when I wrote a lawyer, because they said 500 of us had volunteered for this program. And I had to write a lawyer and tell the lawyer that if they sent me to Atascadero State Hospital where they're going to perform the lobotomies and the sterilization, you're going to have to come right up there and defend me for murder, because I'm going to kill the first thing I see in a smock that's capable of even administering a process like that. And so, and got a whole bunch of other people to take the same position. And eventually they dropped that whole idea. But yeah, they made up their mind. It was 500 of us at least that they were going to perform the frontal lobotomies on, and they were going to sterilize us. So there's a whole lot of things. We changed the sentencing procedure. They eventually eliminated state executions in San Quentin. Then in the Supreme Court decided by popular demand in this country that it was cruel and unusual. It was imbalanced in the sense of how they chose people to be executed and who would go first or last. And so he said it was just too much public doubt as to the justification and, you know, whether justice actually was being served in doing this. So they stopped executing people in this country, period, for about 5 or 6 years, until things got so out of hand in this country. And the public changed their mind and started demanding greater public protection. And so they brought, as a deterrent, the death penalty back. But it's a whole lot of stuff in that manifesto that we addressed that they threw up their hands. Matter of fact, at first they said they didn't believe convicts wrote the manifesto. They said it was too legislative. They thought that some lawyers had written it. Second of all, they said we don't want to yield to this because now we're letting them run the prisons. They're asking for too much bargaining power. You know, they're asking us to stop all the things that make this a prison. You know, they're asking us to give them security and ourselves insecurity by what they're demanding and this whole list of demands. That's the way they saw it at first, but they yielded on most of those levels. At the same time, you had people like Bobby Battles, a very proficient legal mind in Oklahoma, who shut the Oklahoma prison system down. You had Martin Sostre, a Black Puerto Rican out of New York. Okay, we had Larry West, okay, Maharibi. We had him, we had Robert Charles Jordan, and we had Ruchell McGee. And there was somebody else I can't think of right now. Those were the most profound legal minds in the country. I don't know if any of you remember lawyers like Melvin Belli. Have you ever heard of him? You had people like Kunstler, Belli, and all the rest of these super lawyers that people paid millions of dollars. I mean, these were rich lawyers that people paid a lot of money to represent them in courts and stuff. They used to come and ask these brothers, they used to write them, and they used to consult with them over points and authority, legal points and authority, constitutional measures and stuff. You had cats that can go to court and recite the United States Constitution like a preacher could recite out the Bible. And the lawyers and the judges would be there turning pages trying to keep up with them. That's how profound they were. Ruchell McGee is one of them. He's a legal mastermind, and he was helping other people get out of prison. And the reason why they railroaded him, he was so good in trying to defend himself here in the LA Superior Court that the only way they could stop him and disqualify him was they said that he was insane, that he wasn't mentally capable of proceeding with a per persona posture in the courtroom as his own attorney. And so when he came to the penitentiary, he's still fighting his case, still appealing his case. But Ruchell was so angry with the courts, he was so angry with America, that in between all of his points and authorities, because I read all of this, because I used to smuggle this stuff out of the penitentiary, all right? He would send his opening brief to the courts, but in between the lines, he was cussing them out. And he was threatening them. He said, yeah, this, blah. He said, man, y'all gonna pay for everything you done did to us since 1619. Oh, you're gonna pay for this. You're gonna pay for that. We're coming at you. Your day is coming. You will be done. And the judge was saying that to the warden of San Quentin, and the warden of San Quentin would put Rochelle in the hole. And that's why Rochelle McGee wound up in the courtroom on August 7th, 1970, because he was locked up for making all these threats to the judge. He was not part of that whole plan. He was not within the fold. You know, everybody respected him as a jailhouse lawyer and a brother who was devoted and sincere. All right. And when he was in that courtroom and that youngster, Jonathan Jackson, walked in there and pulled out them guns, and he was sitting on the stand, a witness stand, he looked, he said, the Lord have mercy, he give me one of them. This is what I've been waiting on. That was the happiest day in his life, when them guns come in that courtroom. He said, pass me one of them. And that's what happened to him.
Kumasi, thank you so much for that. And we're over time, but we do have, it looks like 2 questions, or maybe we just have one final question by, is it Pamoja? From the National Plus Coalition?
That's Pamoja.
Pamoja,
Yeah,
thank you.
Pamoja. How everybody doing? I didn't know if I was gonna have the opportunity to say anything, because I knew the time was kind of running out. But I really enjoyed Big Brad, as you spoke, you know, and I want to just say how much I appreciate the host and everything for putting this together. I think this is the second one, so I probably have missed the first one, but I don't want to miss any more, as well as I left my contact and everything in there, but I don't want to hold the demonstration up. But I just wanted to just say, man, I appreciate it. I had a couple questions. I had a question, but I don't want to hold everything up. Hopefully we can connect in some kind of way, and I can get my question answered personally. But thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Kumasi, do you want to?
I'll accept the question if you want to put it out there, but I don't know if you just want to talk head up. But anyway, thank you for your comments, and thank you, you know, for being here and embracing this whole subject matter. I could tell by your name that you already have, so you know, I'm not concerned about that.
So then we can forward that information to you, Kumasi, and you can follow up. I want to say thank you to everyone who attended today. Thank you for Kumasi. You're just a wealth of important information for our community. You know, even I wish there was a way, and maybe you have a way already, to communicate with some of these people inside so that they will understand the work that you guys did back then. They will understand the connection between the Folsom Manifesto and Attica, which we didn't get a chance to talk about today, but it's really important that people see the continuum. And then, you know, I just wish that we could find a way to get this information to those who are behind the walls, let people know who are behind the walls, that there are people out here who support them, and maybe we can find ways to help people understand how they can offer support. That's why we need people like you who can help us understand how difficult it is for our people behind those walls, the kinds of things that they went through then that they're still going through now, and how we can be a source of support. So we hope that, you know, we can be a part of that with you, because we know that you are still, you know, helping people fight some of those battles.
Well, please read through the manifesto so that you can see all the issues of concern then and now, and understand that things are worse today than they were then when we put forth the manifesto. And we had a lot of support. We had legal support. We had we had support from all the different campuses around the country. I helped Sally Seaman Suller. They built a committee for prisoners, humanity, and justice. And those were all white students of hers that formed that committee. And so, you know, they read letters from everybody. We wrote books. You know, there were a number of authors that came to us and asked us questions. And then, you know, they got us to write essays. And they compiled those essays into books. One of them by Eve Pell was called Maximum Security. and there were a few other books, but yeah, please just go through the manifesto itself and understand that the major concern for the people in Attica, once they couldn't get amnesty for the guards and the prisoners who died during the takeover, they couldn't, first of all, they wanted to meet with the governor, Rockefeller, when he wouldn't sit down with them. And then they demanded amnesty. When they couldn't get amnesty, they wanted the same thing we wanted, to be exported out of this country to countries that would accept them. Let us out the country then. We don't even want to be here. And when those helicopters come flying in, see, that question was never answered. And the last meeting that Consular and Bobby Seale and them come in and met with them brothers, and they wanted to know, what's the score? What's happening? What are they going to do? Because either we're going to get what we want, and we're either going to get away from this without anything happening to us, or we're going to take these hostages out. And they didn't take one hostage out. And one of the reasons was because when those helicopters flew in over the yard, they were sticking their clenched fists in the air, saluting them, thinking that those were the people coming to pick them up, take them to the airport so they could be exported. They were thinking that had finally come through, and they gunned them down. They dropped tear gas on them and they gunned them down. But that whole incident was because of George Jackson. It started because they were mourning the death of George Jackson. They were wearing black armbands, and they were very solemn and serious. And you had a lot of revolutionaries and a lot of politically minded prisoners in Attica at that time. Black, Puerto Rican, white, you had them. And it's my contention that when they knocked them guys off at Attica, they wiped out a whole generation of street leadership in New York, because I don't think New York has been the same since.
Well, so for everyone, please, before you leave, fill out the assessment. And I do want to say from one of our participants, Sharon Johnson, she said, this has been a truly revelatory talk. Thank you, Brother Kumasi, Dr. Karin, Archivist Keith, for your work. And then she also says, I'm shook. So that means the information is really resonating with her. We really appreciate your questions and your, Dr. Henderson giving us all this information that you put in the chat. When something is mentioned, he just directs people to where they need to go online to get that information. So that's great too. If anybody wants to hang on and I don't know, continue the conversation, please feel free. If not, then we are going to exit.
And salute and thank you all.
And Brother Kumasi, if I may, since we're still on this, can I ask you then, is one of the things after when you said the some of the other people who come into the prison, how they may been taken away from that struggle, does that take us back to where you started when we're talking about Slausons? Because by the 70s and the mid 70s at least, and the later 70s, now we have the large scale Crips and Bloods now in prison for the first time after 75 and after. And is that part of, because they targeted the people that were more political, so what was left there to do a lot of the socialization was not either or now, Brother Kumasi, I'm just saying, but there were more of those who become Crips and Bloods than it was people from the Black Militant Front, for example.
You're pretty much on target, because in the beginning, when we first started getting Crips and Bloods in the prison, and the movement was in full swing and dominated the prison system, they were only coming in one or two at a time. But a mistake that was made by older cats that was already in prison, they were afraid of these youngsters coming in. And they thought that the youngsters were so black on black oriented and so violent that they wanted to move on those youngsters as they came in and make them lock up, because they didn't want them on the yard. They were afraid of them. I kept telling those our little brothers, what you in here for? How did you come up? How are you different than they are? They're the ones we need to pull up under our belt, and we lace them up. We educate them and motivate them, okay? And let them be the the second charge to come behind us and do better than we did. They have to advance the line of struggle beyond where we were able to take it. But there was this disconnect. In the meantime, the prison authorities took all your militants and locked them up, put them in the holes. And then they created Pelican Bay. And I read a magazine that Bird gave me, all right, that is a state law enforcement magazine. And they did a whole article on Pelican Bay. The name of the article was A Place Worse Than Death. At the end of the article, they made the statement: predators and nonconformists, California now has a place for you. The predators are the active gang members running around bullying and trying to be the ones who control, and they compete for control of the rackets and a power statement in the yard of the prisons. The nonconformists are your militants who ain't going for all that stuff, who don't go along, they don't subscribe to prison culture, they subscribe to revolutionary culture. They don't subscribe to the idea each man, you do your own time. Don't worry about the next fellow. You know what I'm saying? No, they say, no, this is a collective responsibility. We're all in this together, you know, and we're going to get through this together, and we're going to come out of this because of our unity and our togetherness and having cooperated and worked with each other, you know? So the guys that come in behind us, they brought in their culture from the streets, and instead of fighting against the system, and they turning the guns on each other, all right? And they even helped the system against people in the prison who didn't follow their script. You see what I'm saying? So by the time the gangbangers came in, and came in strong, they even turned on the political prisoners. See, our job was to protect all political prisoners. When Huey Newton came into penitentiary, he was our responsibility to make sure that he came, he lived, and he left safely, all right? When he stayed over the night in Soledad, I told the lieutenant that Huey Newton's down in the hole, he better not get an ingrown toenail infection. He better not get a cough, okay? Because I'm holding you responsible. We wasn't gonna let anything happen to him, David Hilliard, Geronimo, or anybody else on our watch, because that would have been to our embarrassment. That we stood by and let something happen. There was a brother that came out of the college network. I can't think of his name, but they took over several colleges out here. They took over this college. They took over the one at Cal State LA. And this one brother was convicted for a campus takeover. And he came through Soledad. We treated him like an icon, like a hero. And we made sure nothing happened to him, that neither prisoners or staff or administrators did anything to that brother. That was our responsibility, to look out for the lives and the well-being and the interest of all Black prisoners. Now, like I say, only 1% of us did that for the 99%.
Yeah, excuse me, comrade. How y'all doing? I wanted to kind of introduce myself while I was listening to the brother talk. You know, I'm brother Pamalja, and right now I'm currently still. I don't know if you all have heard of Parchman, Mississippi, which is Mississippi State Prison. Yeah. And bro, I've been here for 22 years. I paroled next year, but I don't know if you all have heard of the riot that took place in 2020. But I had started a movement called the National Plus Coalition in January of 2020. And the reason why I had did it is because the first person that was killed was my cousin, my second cousin. Then the second person that was killed was my baby brother. So it was a huge gang riot. A war had kicked off. It lasted for about 7 days. You know, since we got phones and things of that nature there, you know, it spread throughout the prison system like wildfire. I'm talking about from prison to the next. So it lasted for about 4 or 5 days before they really just got complete control over it and whatnot. And after it happened, what I did was I just stepped up and, you know, start organizing amongst the multitude on the inside. and I've done well at doing it. If I can say so myself, I've done well at doing it. And it just, we go through so much up in here, bro, going through just like what you were saying about how the gangs just came in, and a lot of the older brothers just started letting things just go on. Cause I say it myself because, at one point in time, I was one of the leaders. I was one of the chiefs myself over one of them, until I just finally just seen a whole nother way of looking at things. And I just started trying my best to change things. But since then, since 2020, we have done some real good things organizing. We've got a lot of good things done on the inside as well as we have also spread to the outside, to the point right now where we have an inside connection. We kind of connected with like seven different states, all on the inside, basically doing what you speaking about in the manifesto. We're trying to spread that, you feel what I'm saying, to a national way of if we could get these guys on the inside, because I look at it like that. Those comrades, those brothers and sisters on the outside, they have a love and a passion for fighting for what's right, but us on the inside, we fighting for our life. You see what I'm saying? So it's like who better to give them advice than us on the inside that been in here for 2, 3, 4 decades and things of that nature there, So we connected, like I said, from about 7 different states, and we unite, we organize. We have a podcast that come on twice a month. We just doing our best to just get more people involved to spread the message on that what you're saying. You feel what I'm saying? So that's why I sat here the whole time while you was talking and tentative. You feel what I'm saying? So I can soak up every bit of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that you have. And that's why I left my contacts and everything in there. And I'm gonna hit you up. Also, I got your email. But I'm just trying to just continue spreading, because like I said, I did 22 years and I paroled next year. If the Lord say the same. But when I get out, I'm not about to forget where I just set these 2.5 decades. You feel me? So I just want to connect with more brothers and sisters from state to state, and do our best to try to help these guys that's on the inside, because they really need help, bro.
Well, I'm proud of you. I'm glad to meet you. I'm willing to work with you. I can suggest that you keep on pushing and try to connect the links on a national level. Our vision has always been, my thing wasn't just a statewide strike. I wanted to have a continental strike, shut every prison in the United States of America down and force them to deal with these issues. Okay. Just keep organizing, keep connecting. I've dealt with cats that went through the same thing at the Lee Penitentiary in South Carolina a couple of years ago, man, where they killed 7 of each other, man. Crips, Bloods, there was Rastas, Muslims, disciples, gangster disciples. All these guys, man, they got into it in Bloods. They got into it at the prison in South Carolina. And I had to talk to them on the phone. We had to have a national network. We had lawyers. We had radio show hosts and everybody else involved in trying to deal with that situation and make them understand that if you want help or you want support from the outside community, you have to put a human face on the prisoner in your state, because people on the street look at you as the ones who have victimized them. They look at you as the villain. They feel like you're the one that broke in their house. You're the one that did a home invasion robbery. You're the one that killed one of their sons or family members in a gang dispute and stuff. So that question is, why should I support you? Why should I consider you more human than anybody else that I want to deal with? Why would I consider you human enough to even want to stop what you're going through in there? So there's a lot of work that has to be done. And these guys, man, have to realize, as long as they're doing that stuff to each other, killing each other wholesale inside the prisons, people are afraid to let them come back to the streets, and they're not going to give them no real support. So they've got to make a cultural and a revolutionary change inside those prisons, man, to where people on the street, man, people that used to on the streets used to look up to us. They was losing so many leaders out here. There were so many people that were in disarray and were so confused about which way to go. They actually started looking toward prisoners for the answers to the contradictions that they were going through out here on the street. They were looking for prison leadership to come out here and lead the struggles in this country for Black people. That's how convinced they were that we were. So we were writing in the Black Scholar magazine when Nikki Giovanni and Haki Madhubuti and all of them was constantly publishing stories and letters and poems and position papers in the Black Digest magazine. It used to be the Negro. We were writing in the Black Digest magazine. We were doing, man, get in touch with these, get your ideas, get your conversations, get your connections and everything else into publications as well as media, and start touching base with people who can come to a common accord with one another, and you move from there. You're doing a great job. You know, you're doing a great and beautiful job. And I know how lonely it is and how thankless it is, but keep on pushing.
Right. And I want to say also to the host, to you as well as the host, I want to invite you all to collab with us also, because we had just, like I say, man, we've came a long way from behind these walls, you know, to the point where right now, you know, we do have a national presence, you know, 501c3, as well as we just started our production company. So we have a Roku channel that will be up probably in like another 2 weeks. And our whole thing is activism. You feel what I'm saying? Not saying that that's all that the channel will be about, but the reason why we founded it, the channel as well as the platform is for guys that's on the inside to be able to have an outlet. You see what I'm saying? Because and I've met many people that have this, you feel, have an outlet, but they charging, and you know, us then is a lot of them don't want to deal with guys that's on the inside. So it's like I felt like, man, well, I'm just gonna build it myself. You feel what I'm saying? I'm just gonna build it myself. And I went through a lot building with a lot of different guys that was on the inside that was selfish with, you know, whatever it was that they was doing. But I just kept it moving. I kept it positive and I kept it moving. And like I said, right now, you know, that's what we have going. I would like to see, you know, you as well, something like this here, you feel me, on a bigger screen, so brothers and sisters out there could really just hear it. Not saying that it's not already out there, you know, but I would like to help push this type of knowledge on another level, man. You feel what I'm saying? And as well as push on that national presence with these guys on the inside to show that, you know, just like what you said, it's a lot of us on the inside that can make some powerful moves, man, as long as our mind is on the right, you know.
All right. Well, I look forward to talking to you.
I put my email in there, so you can contact me and Karen through that if you want.
Dr. Henderson, can you say something about the research and the teaching that you do so that they know who you are? I've known him for what, 30 years now, right?
Oh man, it's been maybe a couple of days. But the most important thing to know about me is I'm born and raised in the Brewster Projects on the east side of Detroit. So my family and friends, they were in the Black Panther Party, RNA, the League Revolutionary Black Workers. What I put in the chat is a free online link to my book. I sent it to Brother Kumasi. The book is free. And this is the thing I get on my colleagues about. You can access it wherever you can access it online, in prisons, in community church organizations. Make our books free. You got a class analysis, but you don't know how to make your book free. So we've been organized, and I've been working with a lot of the people. I was the younger brother, Brother Kumasi, so the people like Mario Badelli and people like James Boggs, Harold Cruz, one of my professors. So we've been working in prisons since the 80s. We worked to organize gang truces, street organizations, truces since the late 80s. One of the brothers who we was working with is the Attorney General in Mississippi. He was the attorney for Sharif Willis, or the Almighty Vice Lord Nation back in the late 80s, trying to make peace in Minneapolis. We're doing it with Marion Stamps, Aku and Jerry, the Black Panther Party, Marion Kramer in Detroit, the Black Panther Party, and General Baker, the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. So I'm saying you got a lot of younger brothers and sisters out here, don't look too young, but who listened to you and went into the academy and never thought, this ain't work. This work ain't difficult, it's different. So I got a federal lawsuit against Penn State for racial discrimination, but I still done published 2 University Press books in like 7 months. One at University of Michigan, because I do quantitative analysis of war. They ain't got too many Black folks to do quantitative analysis of international war. But the brothers and sisters schooled me in that in the 80s. They, Earl, you're gonna carve out this niche. But the book I sent to you, The Revolution Will Not Be Theorized, only numbers are page numbers, but it's about the general strike, Du Bois is theorizing, and the slave revolution in the United States, how I got our liberation. And my main thesis is that we were studying in the 1960s. Again, y'all were doing this. I ain't mad at you, trying to build on your work. They were studying, but they didn't theorize our own slave revolution, which is how we got liberation here. And when Du Bois said that in 1935, he was ignored in Black Reconstruction. And you done said general strike several times. And that's what Du Bois said happened. But the next year, he said it was a slave revolt. When the white boy Steve Hahn said the same thing in 2004, he got a Pulitzer Prize. You see what I'm saying? So I look at what these folks are doing, but the last thing I say, they killed the first use of a police discharge of a weapon in State College, Pennsylvania, which is where I am at Penn State, was against a brother named Osaji on a health check by his father. So last year we had about 2,000 folks out in the street, many of them white folks. Because if we got to organize for a revolutionary change in Black communities, got to have some in white communities too, and to have them galvanized as well. Because I don't want to come to you or anybody talk about what I did then, what you're doing now, where you are. But my heart's always in Detroit, and I'm constantly going back and forth to Detroit here. So that's how I would introduce myself as a scholar and an activist in that tradition. And I sent you the book. Again, the book is free. You can access it online. The last 2 books I wrote was free. And we can do that. So we can get access. And the last thing I say to those students, and we get them up here too, I say, if you knew the civil rights movement, you wouldn't say that. But I tell them this, white supremacism won't just teach you what to think, it'll teach you how to think. And that's why you're thinking like that.
So you get that too. We're gonna take off.
Yeah, we're gonna do this thing.
Please fill out the assessment, please.
Definitely. Thank you all for a
That
wonderful
demonstrates
program.
the usefulness of
Brother
the
Keith from off the west side, off Linwood. Beautiful,
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah, I could tell there was some kind of vibe about you.
That's also my biological brother's name. Beautiful, Brother Keith.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And Dr. Henderson, I remember you from back in the day. We come out the same era, by the way.
Wow.
I was in college when I saw you in a documentary called Racism 101, bro.
Wow.
That was you.
Yeah, that was us taking over the University of Michigan. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
That's back 86, 87.
Thank you,
Wow.
Dr.
Thank you,
Stanford.
Brother Lee.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Stanford.
Brother
Thank you,
Kumasi.
Keith.
Thank you, Brother
I'm
Bird.
gonna exchange emails.
Thank you, Bird.
Thank you very much.